Sister has asked a question, the non-Muslim sister, that there are some verses of the Quran which are abrogating or contradicting. It's cancelled. So does it mean that, how can there be a contradiction? If you read the Quran, there are no two verses in the Quran which contradict. I challenge anyone to point out any two verses in the Quran which contradict. Allah says clearly in the Quran in Surah Nisa, chapter number 4, verse number 82, Allah says, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. Do they not consider the Quran with care? Had it been from anyone besides Allah, there would have been many contradictions. Now, in the Muslim Ummah, I'm aware, there is a concept of abrogation, theory of abrogation, known as mansukh and naskh, based on the verse of the Quran of Surah Baqarah chapter 2, verse number 106, and Surah Nahl chapter number 16, verse number 101, which says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not cause any of his ayat, any of his signs to be forgotten. He substitutes it with something better or similar. Now, based on this verse, there are many scholars who have propounded the theory of abrogation, naskh and mansukh. People will say, what is Dr. Zakir talking about? No, that no verse will contradict. The Quran says the verse will not contradict. It will not contradict. And if you read the verse of the Quran, you can analyze the verse of the Quran in two ways. One way is that the ayahs talking in the Quran are referring to the earlier scriptures. Maybe Torah, maybe Injil. So Allah says, I do not cause any of the ayahs, the signs of Allah, the previous verses of the previous revelation, to be forgotten, but substitute it with something better or similar. Something better and similar is the Quran. Now, if you agree that the ayat mentioned in the verse is ayat of the Quran, then too I have an answer. It means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed one verse of the Quran, what was relevant for that time, and after that He revealed another verse, but that verse is not contradicting, it is giving more information. And the two verses given by the sister of Surah Nisa chapter 4 verse 15 and Surah Nur chapter number 24 verse number 2, though she has the Nisa chapter number 4 verse number 15 says that if anyone is caught in fornication, if any woman is caught in fornication, then keep her in custody in house arrest like. Seclude her until she dies or Allah ordains something else. And then Surah Nur chapter number 24 verse number 2 says that as for the fornicator, person who commits fornication, give them punishment of 100 lashes. Now people will think, is there a contradiction? If the first Quranic verse of Surah Nisa chapter 4 verse 15 had said that put the woman in house arrest and a full stop, then Surah Nur of 100 lashes would contradict. It says that keep them in house until they die or until Allah gives something else. The verse of the Quran does say that Allah will give some other punishment later on. If that part wasn't there, there would have been a contradiction. So there's no contradiction. It says that this punishment is temporary. Later on, Allah will reveal something else. What we realize, what Quran says, according to me in mansukh and naskh, what it happens, that Allah, in some prohibitions, He has brought in stages. And the best example I give is of alcohol. The first verse to be revealed regarding alcohol is Surah Baqarah chapter 2 verse 219, where Allah says, in intoxicants, there is loss as well as profit. The loss is more than profit. This verse of the Quran does not prohibit alcohol. It only says, in intoxicant, there is loss and profit. The loss is more than profit. The next verse to be revealed of prohibition was Surah Nisa chapter 4 verse 43, which says that do not pray with your mind befogged. When you are intoxicated, do not pray. That means it's a higher degree now. Previously it did not say it was haram. It only gave you guidance. In intoxicant there is loss and profit, loss is more than profit. Next verse says, do not pray with your mind befogged. When you are intoxicated, you can't pray. Now since a Muslim has to pray 5 times a day, indirectly he can't pray. He can't have intoxicant the full day. In night, option is there. Not it saying you should have. The final haram prohibition came in Surah Ma'idah, chapter 5, verse number 90, which says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you believe, innamal khamru wal maisuru, most certainly intoxicants and gambling, wal anzabu wal azlamu, dedication of stone, divination of arrows, rijtum min amali shaitan. These are Satan's handiwork. Fashtanibu lalakum tuflihun. Abstain from this handiwork that you may prosper. Here, the final prohibition came. Now, when this verse was revealed, barrels of alcohol, intoxicants were thrown on the streets of Medina, never to be filled again. Then the final haram came. Now if you analyze, many people say that the last verse of Surah Ma'idah chapter 5 verse number 90 has overruled Surah Baqarah chapter 2 verse 19. It is contradicting. It's not contradicting. It is giving more information. The first verse only told you there is loss and profit. Loss is more. Even today the verse is applicable. That verse is even correct today. Even in intoxicants today there is loss and profit. We as medical doctors know there is profit. But the loss is more than profit. The next verse says, don't pray when you're intoxicated. Even today that is applicable. Today you cannot pray when you're intoxicated. But the last final prohibition doesn't contradict, it encompasses. For example, I say that I live in UK. Fine. Then next day I say, I live in London. Third day I say, I live in Harrow. Now moment I say Harrow, London and UK is understood. But my first answer, I live in UK, was a general answer. Then more specific, I live in London. When I say I live in Harrow, it is more specific. It's not contradicting my first answer. So the last prohibition that the alcohol is prohibited is not contradicting that in intoxicants there is loss and profit. It is yet there. It's not contradicting Surah Nisa chapter 4 verse 43. You cannot pray when you are befogged, when your mind is befogged, when you are intoxicated. So this means there is more information. The last verse of the Quran, if you follow that, the earlier two is automatically followed. It's understood. So therefore, according to me, and according to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is not a single contradiction in the Quran. If there were any contradiction, this book cannot be the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I disagree with anyone, let him be the greatest scholar in the world. According to me, and I challenge anyone, whether Muslim or non-Muslim, to point out a single contradiction in the Quran. They will never do it and never will be able to do it.